Good morning. Thank you so much for being here and this super busy Monday, which for many of you is week two. Is it better? Yes. I'm Luisa De Moro. I'm head of energy transitions at Bloomberg NEF. For those that don't know us, we are a strategic research arm inside Bloomberg looking at the opportunities in the transition of all sectors. And we are here today to talk briefly about accelerating the energy transition specifically in the Middle East and Africa. As we all know, and we have been discussing for a week already, the region is extremely vulnerable to the effects of climate change and remains extremely reliant on fossil fuel for power generation. Um, but there are huge opportunities and potential for development of infrastructure and for renewables. But despite of that, we have seen very limited investment flows. For example, in Africa specifically, if we look at all investment allocated to the world in renewable energy sector in 2021, uh, Africa, including sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa, accounted for just 0.5% of the all investment received. So conversations like this one are important to discuss what is working, what lessons we can learn, and how we can accelerate the transition and investments in the region and focus on untapping the potential that we have in all countries. And in terms of recognizing what is working and the progress that have been made, I think we have really good examples to look at in Egypt specifically. So Egypt has been successfully transforming itself into an important energy export hub. Um, it has the 2035 Integrated Sustainable Energy Strategy, which aims to uh, increase its renewable share to 42% by 2035, which is very close already, and has been successfully interconnected with Libya, Jordan, and Syria, and will be at some point interconnected with Saudi Arabia as well. Um, and we have great panelists here today to discuss the enablers and catalysts required to accelerate the pace of energy transition, both in Egypt and in Middle East and Africa as well. So I would like to welcome Sabah Mashali, the CEO of the EETC, the Egyptian Electricity Transmission Company, Claudio Fakin, the CEO of Hitachi Energy, and Osama Bishai, the CEO of Orascom, to have this conversation with us today. And Osama, I would like to start from you. Um, you are leading global energy engineering and construction company. What are the energy transition trends that you're currently seeing across Middle East and Africa region, and what impact are those trends having on Egypt specifically?
Um, Thank you. I think what's happening right now is a good conversion and focus on renewable energy and obviously what I can call downstream of that, the other uses of renewables in order to produce either hydrogen and other media such as ammonia and methanol. But what I see is a great transformation uh, by the government, and Engineer Sabah will definitely confirm that, is not only they would like to reach a target of a 42%, but they would like to accelerate achieving that target. And it was very clear by their commitment or pledge to develop with private developers almost 28 gigawatts of wind. I think this is crucial for Egypt, not only because of the transformation, because quite honestly, Egypt does not have a huge carbon footprint, but I think it's the transformation for that space is also crucial because, like any resource, gas and fuel, either they're expensive or not available. and the conversion to wind will definitely create some strategic security for the for steady power, not only to the Egyptians, but also to develop the industrialization that Egypt would like to address. But I think the biggest challenge that we have right now is funding. Funding is getting to be much more expensive. We are in a high inflation market as we speak. So concessionary funding is crucial to jumpstart ambitious programs like the one Egypt's trying to do.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Mashali, with this in mind, what do you believe are the priority actions for Egypt to continue accelerating the energy transition domestically, especially from a power grid perspective?
Good morning, everybody. It is my pleasure to be with you in this very important session. Before I start the priorities we are focusing on right now, I have to give you a very quick update about what have been done in the electricity Egyptian sector during the last few 8 years. I can say that we already did a big revolution in all the different activities, started with the generation and the transmission and distribution as well. Concerning the upgrade of the national grid, we already succeeded to establish almost a new 500 kV backbone covering all the areas in the country. The length of the 500 kV now is exceeding 7,000 kilometers compared with what was existing before 2014, which not exceed 2,000 kilometers only for the 500 kV. Also, we did a tremendous job of upgrading our grid, establishing new control centers. We did a lot of good things regarding the modernization and digitalization in order to guarantee the stability and the availability and the resilience of the grid. Concerning the priority, we are focusing now towards the continuous of transition of energy. One of big challenges now, like what Engineer Osama mentioned, is how to deal with like this massive capacity of renewable energy. We start to hire a international firm in order to make a very thoroughly technical and commercial study in order to fix what it could be fixed in our grid in order to guarantee that this massive of renewable energy cannot affect the performance of the grid. Also, one of our goals and focus is to be interconnected with a very strong national grids like what we are now establishing as interconnection project between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Also, we are in a very matured position for a discussion of interconnection with Europe as well, to be connected via Greece and Italy or both of them. One of also our essential and big priorities is to make some sort of asset management for our resources and also to build the capacity for the teams in order to cope with this very massive and dramatic changes of the transition energy at the time being.
Thank you so much. And Claudio, considering the fact that Egypt is transforming itself into an important electricity hub, what are the technology related priorities that can help accelerate this progress and integrate renewables faster to the grid?
Thank you. And I think the summary was just done pretty well. If you think about what Isaba just described, first of all, creating a backbone. If you think about the future of the energy system, and if you think about the decarbonization goals, we have to do more from a electrification standpoint. We have to do more from a renewable integration that was mentioned, but we also have to do more in terms of consuming electricity across sectors, industry, buildings, transport. And part of that, of course, is in order to cope with this higher complexity on the source side of the supply side of that energy, on the consumption side of that electricity, there is a need to strengthen the grid system, so the backbone that was just described before. At the same time, because of that complexity, the digital technology comes in at a much higher relevance than in the past. And that was also just mentioned, in order to manage a much more distributed, a much more variable energy source, but also a much more distributed and with different pattern of consumption across those sectors. If you just think about electrification of transport and industry as well. It was also mentioned hydrogen, and of course, more and more should be green hydrogen as a complementarity to that energy future. And when you look at all those different technologies and building blocks, number one, I think from a technology perspective, there is no doubt that we have to look at all those opportunities. It was also mentioned at the edge of the grid. How do we make sure that we provide distributed control centers that can manage that complexity at the edge of the grid and coordinate them with the central? And the aspect of creating then collaboration across the different parts of that value chain, the distribution, the transmission, the generation, the consumption. And of course, as it was also mentioned, Egypt has an opportunity to not only create more capacity, renewable capacity, wind, 20 gigawatt, we just heard from Osama, the aspect of being geographically well positioned to create a hub for that energy to be then shared within the African continent, but also in the future, it was mentioned with Europe. Last point from my side, as a technology provider, all the technology that is needed to do a lot of that, it's available. Of course, we need to continue to innovate. Complementarity such as green hydrogen needs to continue from a maturity standpoint. We need more investments in innovation in those areas. But when it comes to electrifying the energy system, there is a lot of technology available today. And I think the way Egypt is addressing it, it's looking at all those building blocks, looking at strengthening the backbone, the core of that system in order to ensure resilience, reliability, and of course, making sure that all those resources of energy are available across the region.
Thank you so much for a very informative answer. And Mr. Bishai, we talked about the goal to reach 42% of renewables by 2035. And you said that the country is actually aiming to accelerate to achieve it faster. What are the enablers to get there, not by 2035, but much earlier?
The enablers to accelerate this actually is it's a collective effort between the developers of those 28 gigawatts and the EETC. I mean, you understand this is a private development, so paperwork, legal framework, handing over of the sites. So there is a lot of administrative and commercial road that needs to be accelerated between the developers and ETC. Plus the fact that to line up financial institutions to be able to provide adequate funding for that, because wind has a very thin margin of returns compared to other businesses. So basically, the cost of funding and the tenor becomes a crucial element for the success of that program. Last but not least is the dispatch of such power that to be generated. So it's a huge program where you have, I think, a lot of stakeholders that really should be focused on one specific target, is to accelerate that program. And I would like to emphasize that accelerating that program is key for this country, because I believe that from a commercial stand, it's better for Egypt to export its gas rather than use it for power generation. Plus the fact that I mean, being in the business, I always believe that natural resources are never available forever. So there is a possibility that there will become a shortage, and this becomes a necessity. So there should be and this is where I believe that EETC and Ministry of Electricity should really lead the way to get everybody in line and focus on that target.
Thank you so much. And the three of you have touched at some point at the role of digitalization as the grid gets more complex, more interconnected, renewables come in. I would love to hear from you, Sabah. What are your expectations in terms of the role of digitalization in the national grid and the plans to allow deeper interconnection and penetration of renewables as well?
I do believe for any utility without digitalization, they will miss a lot of things: the availability, the reliability, the resilience of the grid. So I do believe digitalization will play a very vital role in the new coming years in order to achieve all these targets. In our case, we started, as I mentioned, to rely to a high extent on the new technologies for the digitalization of our grid. We started since 7 or 8 years ago to even establish new control centers or upgrading what has been existing before. Also, currently, we are focusing on shifting all the operation for all the substation in Egypt to operate unmanned. And this, of course, without digitalization and automation, substation cannot work. I do believe for any utility targeted to decrease the planned outage or the forced outage without relying on a very updated digitalization system, it cannot work. So in my opinion, during the next coming years, the digitalization will be the key for any success of any utility seeking for be a part of a good performance and the standard for any customers in this era. Thank you
so much. And the other point that we have been touching on today is collaboration, right? And what do you think, Claudio, is the role of collaboration to facilitate the energy transition in Egypt and in the region, both on the financing side as well as on the technology deployment side?
Sure, but I think we have a good example here, because all of us are engaged in the project that Ms. Sabah was mentioning before, the interconnection between Egypt and Saudi with HVDC technology. And as Hitachi Energy, we have roughly half of the installed base. So we have reached a maturity for that technology to be able to deploy with the different modes of operations. And we have taken quite some time jointly, all the parties involved, in first of all, planning for that interconnection, planning for the modes of operation. You were mentioning about automation of the grid. Well, there is an important element of this interconnection between Egypt and Saudi, as it is a multi-terminal. It has quite a lot of additional intelligence embedded in the system to be able to manage power flow on any direction at any point in time across those three terminals. And that's a pretty unique feature of this interconnection. And that would have not been able without us working hand in hand with the customer, with also other stakeholders, to first understand what the needs of those two different grids are. And then another example of collaboration is with Osama team. We, as a technology provider, we want to make sure that we put our efforts on developing, innovating, and deploying our core technology. And we need partners that help us to deliver the entire project, the execution, the logistics, the construction, the engineering behind all that, in order for customers like the ETC to then be able to take over those assets and run and operate them in an efficient way. And so there we also found models of collaborating, contractual structures that, of course, we propose as a partner, but then we need their side to also contribute and think about what needs to be done on the customer side also for this type of collaboration to be effective and to be, of course, delivering on time and on cost. This is just one example. We have many more examples across the region. I think this is a great first step to take that collaboration across the regions, across the countries, to the next level. And once again, I really believe Egypt has a quite unique opportunity from a technology point of view, all the support needed, but also the ambition level of becoming that center, that hub from a much broader energy system that, of course, will be more on renewables, cleaner, and more interconnected.
Thank you. And Osama, you have been consistently touching on the finance point. And while when we look at global investment into renewable energy technologies, for example, we see record investment levels every year. We're at the same time seeing investors shifting focus a little bit from emerging markets to developed countries. So the money is there, but we need to find the mechanisms to shift investment back to developing nations. What do you believe are the key bottlenecks that have to be addressed, and what has been proven to work on your case?
Okay. First, you have to ask Engineer Sabah, because she negotiates very tight tariffs. So that's one of the main reasons of the shift to development. It's I'm making fun of it, but it's true. The cost of selling energy or electricity commercially in the developed world is much more profitable than doing it in emerging markets, particularly Egypt. Second is obviously the risk profile or the credit risk that, I mean, banks do not look at energy transition or climate change. They look at dollars and cents and bottom line, and they evaluate the risk and the credit risk of the client, and this has a cost, or it has a burden on the funding. And we have to admit that the cost of generating energy through renewables in the emerging markets is much cheaper, because cost of construction is much less, but the technical component or the technology component, particularly on the wind farms, is quite high compared to the local cost. So I think that the real balance should be two things. people should look at that from a concessionary finance, and I touched base on that before, because that is the only way to be able to achieve that transition in a much more competitive manner. And the other thing is clients such as EETC have to understand that they have to be a little bit more flexible on the ability to make a project bankable and make it attractive to developers to continue to invest in the Middle East.
Sabah, I feel that I need to give you a chance to answer this.
يعني despite what engineer Osama said, I just يعني have to assure you that it should be a win-win situation and a square deal for each party. يعني although we are getting the lowest prices, you cannot believe, but I do believe a lot of investors are knocking our door daily in order to be a part of our program, not only because the lowest tariff, but also because we have a very long track record of commitment towards any investor who is became one of our strategic partners. So it is not only the prices, it is a package of cooperation between the government and the developers. And you can ask Engineer Osama when he came and tell us that it will not be a bankable project. We did a lot of good things for all the developers, not only for Orascom. We increased the tip heights of the turbine in order to make it visible for them. We increased the period of BBA to be 25 years instead of 20. So the government of Egypt, I do believe, played a very competitive game with its strategic partner in order to make it happen. And the result is, as Engineer Osama said, we already committed to execute more than 28 giga. It never happened in any other place of the world.
Could you expand a little bit on the procurement process for anybody that's interested on coming to Egypt?
We have a mix. By the law, I mean, we have a mix of different ways of negotiation with any developers. We have a bid process scheme, and we have also a direct negotiation scheme. And also, there is a lot of dynamics in order to shift from one methodology to another based on different aspects like the prices, like the readiness, the commitment of the developer itself. A lot of things can affect our decision in order to go to direct negotiation or in order to launch a bid for any addition for the renewable energy in our program.
Thank you so much. Claudia, would you like to add anything here, or would you rather remain neutral?
No, absolutely. Thanks for that. The 2 points. So the one, of course, Osama mentioned, right? There is, and then COP is the place where we all, as stakeholders, we need to take the opportunity to make sure that when the different stakeholders, in this case, the financial part of the equation, assess the projects, they not only look at the return on investment for that specific capex element, but look at the entire life cycle and the return on investment on the life cycle, taking into account the goal to decarbonize the energy system, because that has a price tag. And on what Nisaba was also mentioning about different models of attracting investment, there is no doubt that today, from a global perspective, as we see pretty much every single market out there as the global leader in this space, there is a challenge in terms of leveraging that global footprint, leveraging all the opportunities of global trade that, of course, are affecting the speed at which we can deploy some of those projects. But once again, this is the forum where we all come together, and I think I look forward really to take COP27 as the one that we move from planning, that we move from decision, making process to execute, and then getting the commitment from everyone to do so.
Thank you. And Sabah, I know that you need to leave to a very important meeting in a few minutes. So I'd like to, before you do that, to give you an opportunity to just say your final words on what do you believe is the most important priority that this audience and everybody that's watching us online should take away from this conversation about transitioning Egypt.
يعني what I can say in the final session that يعني Egypt is already set a target for being one of the big player towards the decarbonization. We are very aware about the global climate change, and we are very committed to play a vital role in this. For many reasons, because يعني Egypt has already يعني a very natural resources, huge natural resources, wind, solar, and the land as well. What I can say for the audience is that the government of Egypt is very committed towards its plan for increasing the reliance on renewable energy to high extent. Currently, we are updating our strategy in order to accommodate more than 42% from our energy mix. All the legislation and the framework which can encourage any serious developer to invest in our country is there, and we are very committed to make it successful for both of us, not only the government, but also for the partners as well, in order to be yani, like a continuous process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for joining us today. And have a great meetings and the rest of the day. The last point I want to touch on is we have been speaking about value chain and value chain constraints. Azam, I would like to hear from you, how is that affecting your business and what are your expectations moving forward?
Value chain is a key element in the acceleration of that program, and I believe that there is a, I mean, there is a risk and there is an opportunity here, because to be able to develop 28 gigawatts of wind farms almost simultaneously will create a lot of pressure on the supply chain for that, particularly on the turbines, on the supplies, even on construction capabilities. On the other hand, that's an opportunity in order for some players to to create an edge where they could become either localize some of the activities, make it much more available, make it much more competitive. So there is an opportunity there. The other thing is I think is the most important issue is human resources or human capital, and having the right people to do this transformation is key for its success. And I mean, we are quite proud and confident that we have the right skill set to do that. But I think it's another challenge for Egypt and for a lot of stakeholders to have the right players around on the table to make this happen in this short period of time.
Thank you,
And
Claudio.
if I may, thank you for bringing that up, because I think one of the key assets that actually Egypt has is that talent pool. There is no need. There is a challenge that we need to debottleneck from a technology standpoint. As I mentioned, there is a lot already available. We need to help each other to debottleneck some of the supply chain aspects, but that's more of a temporary. But on the long term, and the long-term commitment that was mentioned before, we need the resources. We need the talent that are able to step in to implement this massive plan of deployment of all that technology and all those projects. And I think once again, in that sense, Egypt can also become a hub for providing that talent pool.
Thank you. And I would like to just wrap it up with the question that I've asked Sabah on What do you believe is the most important takeaway from this conversation today?
Well, the takeaway is quite obvious. I mean, we are very excited to be part of the grand scheme of EETC and the Ministry of Electricity. I think this is a turning point. This COP27, a turning point where Egypt made a huge commitment to transition its renewable energy to become quite a sizable factor in its overall mix. So, I mean, it's an exciting time. I believe that will be a focus for everybody over the next maybe a couple of years. And I think the major takeaway is that we see that the EETC, who is our client, they are really committed to make it happen, which I think is a real factor for the success.
Claudia?
For me, as يعني Mr. Claudio said, يعني we have to move from the planning and the talking to the execution of our targets. And I do believe Egypt is very serious and committed to make it happen this time. We are gathering and strengthening all the efforts from all the stakeholders in order to make it يعني, in the very near future as a reality for being a good model and a leading company in the region in order to implement what we are targeting for.
This is a big shift, it's a big transition, but the region and Egypt within the region has all the resources moving from the fossil into the renewables with sun and wind, and as I mentioned before, a lot of potential also from a talent standpoint. We need to work jointly to find ways of building collaboration that allows to deploy the technology at the speed and at the scale, and of course to make sure that we make those projects attractive from a funding perspective. But I think it's a great place to be, and look forward to first to deliver the first joint project that we have, and then take the next step in interconnecting the rest of the continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have about 5 minutes for questions if anybody is interested. So I think we can wrap it up. I think I've learned a lot today. Conclusion is exciting times for Egypt, a lot of opportunity. I'm really impressed to hear about the huge amount of capacity that is planned and getting built in the country. And digitalization is key, financing mechanisms, the need for concessional finance. I will leave the tariff question open and looking forward to see what comes out of this, and hoping that with COP here and all the great things that are going on, we can effectively move from planning to execution of those ambitions, commitments. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for being here Monday morning. Thank you.